Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 203. Today I'm going to talk about Pathfinder, the adventure card game. I'll try to get the whole box in there for you. This is a game from Paizo and designed by Mike Selinker, who I think was part of Cheap Ass Games, and some other stuff was escaping my head right now. So basically what this game is very much an RPG in card game form. So if you're going into this thinking it's more like a deck builder or sort of a traditional card game or more of a Euro card game, it's not. It's basically an RPG. You can do a long campaign, you can do short little scenarios, maybe a couple of scenarios to do an adventure kind of thing. You're going to have characters that you're going to level up. They're going to get feats and powers and items and different abilities, and then kind of focus their classes later and stuff like that. So it's very much a campaign, a sort of co-op kind of game. And you're going to go into different adventures and just have, basically your RPG tropes. It's Pathfinder, the card game, is really what it is. So let me go into some detail here about, the different characters, the different adventures, how the stuff's going to work together, how the campaign's going to kind of unfold. Now, this game comes with basically sort of two adventure paths, if you will. It comes with the base game stuff, and then it comes with Adventure Pack 1 inside the box. You can also get the character add-on, which I've got here. Add some new characters and spells and items and things. So we're going to go from sort of an unboxing into sort of how you're going to sort of treat the game and unravel it. So if you're more of a board game or card gamer, this is probably going to be very much a different experience for you. If you're a role player, it's probably also going to be very much a different experience for you because there's no DM. Basically, the scenarios and all of the events and things are triggered and created by this sort of generator, which is the card game. So let's take a look. So as you can see, you've got quite a hefty box here. So let's just take the lid off here. And inside, we'll talk about this stuff in a second. So you've got slots here for all the different things. So you can see all of the monsters I've got here. You've got a ton of these blessing cards. So everything's very easy to organize. This area here is supposed to be for characters, but I don't quite have enough cards really to worry about too much where stuff's going to be stored. Also got some dice here. Game comes with some basic different types of dice. You can see you got an 8 and 6, and there's a 10 and a 12 in there as well. You've also got these boxes here, and the cool thing is you got these sort of slots here where these boxes can fit. Now this one's empty, but I've left it in there just in case I want to put stuff back in here. But this is the character add-on deck, which comes with some extra items and characters and things to use in your adventure. And then you've got Adventure Deck 1. And I'm not sure exactly how many of these are supposed to come up out with, but this one is here. The cards are inside of here. This has got an adventure with, I believe, 3 or 4 different scenarios. And this is going to go here. And so as you get these, you can basically be working an adventure deck, have those cards mixed in here with the base cards, and then you can, once you get done with Adventure 1, you put those back in here, you pull the cards from Adventure 2, mix those in, and then you can keep going. Now the very first thing you're going to do, after reading the rules, of course, which is pretty well written, is going to choose your character. Now the characters, I have printed out these sheets for here. So you can see all kinds of stuff, traditional RPG stuff. I've got all the characters printed out. These are available on Paizo's site to print out. And this is all the characters that are in also the add-on pack as well as the basic game. So you're going to go here and choose a character, and they've got your sort of traditional, fantasy stuff: male human fighter, female human sorcerer, female elf rogue, and things like that. So you're going to have this guy here, and this is sort of the guy you're going to be moving around, at different locations and things. And then you've got a couple of different things here. So you've got this card here, which is going to show his starting loadout, if you will. So this guy's deck must have exactly 5 weapons, no spells, 3 armor, 2 items, 2 allies, and 3 blessings. Now you can see as you level up, you're going to be able to check off some of these boxes, so you can get more weapons in your deck and different things like that. So the game actually tells you, go ahead and check these off with pencil, and then you can erase it if you want. But I am never going to do that. So that is where these character cards come in. And so there are a couple of sheets for each character that add on some of this other stuff. So if we look here, you can see the character's basic stuff. So he's got strength. When he does a strength check, he's going to do a D10. If he's doing melee, he's going to add a +3. You've got your dex, which is D8, constitution D8. So when you make these checks here, you're going to basically make a die roll like it says, and then add any modifiers. You may have some other modifiers, basically from blessings or weapons. So you can see this has got a sword here. So, for example, for your combat check, reveal this card to roll your strength or melee die, which is, in this case, a d10, plus another d10. You may additionally discard this card and add another d10. If you aren't proficient with weapons, the difficulty of this check is increased by 4. So one thing that keep in mind is if, in some cases, if you don't have a particular skill, you can always roll this d4 and try to, get through the check that way. That is usually not going to be enough. So the other thing that you're going to get with this card, as well as this little, avatar to move around, is you have these role cards here. So you can see Valeros, instead of just being a fighter, he can be a weapon master or a guardian. Now, at some point, not yet in the cards that we have here, for the winning in a scenario or adventure, I'm not really sure, you're going to be able to change your role here. So instead of, having these sort of loadout here, you're going to go and put that over like so, and then now you've got your basic stuff plus these extra things. So the fighter has become a guardian and now has a lot more abilities. And all that stuff is on these character sheets here. So after choosing your character there, you're going to load them out based on what was said on the card. Now the game does give you a default sort of loadout for each of these characters here, and it does talk about the ones in the add-on deck as well. So for Ezrin, for example, his weapon could be a quarterstaff, and so all of this stuff is basically kind of fits the type of character you want. So if you don't want to spend too much time really analyzing and agonizing over what to put in there, you can use those as well. So after selecting the characters, the first thing you want to do is going to basically figure out how you want to play the game. So here is an adventure path here. So you can see you've got the 6 adventures, part of this adventure path. Now, Burnt Offerings is what comes in this adventure pack here. So this is the Burnt Offerings adventure deck. So if you want to start the campaign, you can start in with that deck there. Now this base game also comes with a little adventure of its own. So you've got Perils of the Lost Coast, and to complete this adventure, you have these scenarios to go through: Brigand Doom, Poison Pill, Black Fang's Dungeon. So before you start the campaign, you can kind of go through this deck here first. So we're going to say, I'm going to do Perils of the Coast, I'm going to start Brigand Doom. Well, here we have the Brigand Doom scenario here. And so what this is, it tells you the villain that's going to be involved and the type of henchman. And then if we look at Black Fang's Dungeon, we've got another Black Fang as the villain and some different henchmen. And then all these will have some little sort of thematic, story-driven little special abilities that are going to occur. And then you can see after you complete an adventure or after you complete a scenario, you're going to get different rewards. And these are going to change out the decks that you started with. So you have some new items. Maybe some of them will award you a feat, so you can check off one of the boxes there. Very much a campaign. Now let's say, for argument's sake, we decided to do Brigand Doom. So on the back side here, you can see the locations that you're going to add. And this is based on the number of players. So if we're playing a single player game, we'll add these 3 locations. If we add a second player, we're going to add a 4th location, all the way up to 6 players. Now with just the base game, basically it's designed to be playable up to 4. Once you add on the character add-on deck, then you can start playing with 6 players. So if you're playing a 6-player Brigand Doom, you're going to add, all 8 of these locations there. So we'll go ahead and put that scenario in the middle, and then we're going to draw some locations. So let's say we're playing a 3-player game. So the adventure calls for the farmhouse, the wooden bridge, the woods, the waterfront, and the academy. So there's information on here, so you're going to look at the deck list here. So what we're going to do is we're going to randomly draw 3 monsters, 1 barrier, 1 weapon, 3 items, and 1 ally, and then 0 of the rest of these. We're going to shuffle those, put those under here. It's going to have a little bit different makeup for a wooden bridge, but like the academy here, it's not going to have a whole lot of monsters in it. It's only going to have 1, but it's going to have a lot of spells, because this is where sorcerers and wizards will go. So we're going to set these out around the board with some decks underneath them. Now, in addition to the other cards that you're going to shuffle in these locations, you're also going to take the villain outlined by the scenario as well as the henchman. And so you're going to shuffle these, basically shuffle these up here, like so, and then you're going to shuffle each one of these into the different locations, like so. So that way you're basically trying to find the villain, but you're not sure where he is. But you do know that if you find a henchman in a spot, so here's the bandit henchman, if we find him here, then the villain's not there. So after shuffling the villain and the henchmen's in with all the other items and monsters, players will take their little avatars here and then basically put them at a different location here. So maybe Sione actually wants to start the academy, maybe to get some spells or something. And then we'll put Valeros at the woods and Mauricio at the wooden bridge. The next thing you need to do is take 30 of these blessing cards and then stick them somewhere in the middle. Let's just put them here. And these are going to act as a timer of sorts. So the first thing everybody's going to do on their turn is flip over a blessing. And the text on here is usually benign. There are other blessings that you may have in your deck that will let you sort of copy these and use their ability, but mostly this is just a timer to show, how long you have to the end of the game. If you haven't defeated the villain and before these run out, basically you lose. So the first thing you're going to do is flip a blessing, and then if you were at the same location as another player, you could give them a card out of your hand. So maybe I had this sword here that I wanted to give to the fighter, so if I had started my turn there, I could give them this sword and maybe they could use it. The next thing that you could do, and it's optional, is you could just move to any location, so there's no adjacency or anything. You just basically go from here to wherever you want to go. And then you can explore. That's basically turning over the top card of the deck that would be under these locations here. And then you're going to have either an encounter or you're going to have a sort of a boon come up. So encounters, you're going to have those with different monsters or villains, and then maybe you try to discover an item, and then you're going to have a check to maybe discover the item or defeat the monster that you revealed. So let's take a look at one of these monsters. So here's a zombie. You can see the basic information there. Here's your check to defeat. So you need a combat value of 9 or more. And then it has some other things. So this is immune to mental and poison. And then you have the damage dealt by the zombie. And then if undefeated, each other character at this location summons and encounters a zombie. So sometimes it'll tell you to summon things, and then basically you go back into the box and then try to find the cards there and then summon them to that location. So the way the check's going to work is you're going to do combat here in this case. So let's take a look at maybe Valeros is fighting this zombie here. So he's going to use his strength to combat. You may have like a wisdom check or something if it was more of a mythical, magical kind of creature or something like that. So he's going to automatically roll a d10, and he's going to add +3 because he's doing a melee combat. But for each encounter, each check, you can actually play one card here. So if I was here, Valeros was here with the zombie, he could take and use one card, for that encounter. So here he's got the battle axe here. So this says, for your combat check, reveal this card to roll your strength or melee die plus another d6. You may additionally discard this card or roll a d8, etc. So these cards are going to do a couple different things. If you reveal it, you just have to show it, and then you put it back into your hand. If you have to discard it, then it's in your discard pile, unless some other blessing or something, puts it back into your hand. And then another thing would be to recharge it. Basically, you take it and stick it underneath the bottom of your deck. So the deck is basically your life points. Okay, so if you ever run out of your deck and all the way through your hand, you're basically dead, and you might as well start the adventure over because, if you're going to play a campaign, you kind of want everybody else to, stay along with you. The nice thing is that you can sort of save the game, if you will, with these sheets here. So if you have to start over, it's not too bad to go back and reference, what items did I have before we started, what feats did I have and stuff like that. So you can easily, restart the adventure that way. So it's very important to keep these, in your hand. The other thing is if you take damage, let's say we didn't defeat this guy, well, you're basically going to take the difference between the target number and then what you had. So let's say I did really poorly for some reason and I had a 5 versus his 9. That means I'm going to take 4 damage. And what that is I'm going to discard cards out of my hand up to 4. So if I have, 6 cards in my hand, I get to discard 4 of them and then they're discarded. Now if you have to discard more than what you have, then it's no big deal. You just stop discarding at that point. Now after your encounter, you can try to close a location. I'll talk about closing locations in a second. But then after that, you're going to basically refill to your hand size. So if we take a look at Valeros here, you can see his hand size is currently 4. So you can discard cards if you want to get them out of your hand and then, draw some more up to 4. But again, the cards are your life points. Now the other thing to keep in mind with checks is if you're at the same location as somebody, you can also play 1 card per check. So we're going to flip 1 card, and then, we're going to do a check. So the person whose turn it is can play a card, and then anybody else can play a card. So maybe you had a nasty monster, you could play the Sanctuary card here to help evade the monster. Now you can also play blessings on somebody else's turn if you're anywhere, on the board here. So you can play a blessing no matter where you're at each of these cards. The last thing here, so if you don't flip a monster, you can actually try to acquire, maybe you flip this spell, and you can see this is a wisdom or divine check of 6. So you don't actually just get this. But if you do, you get it and it goes right into your hand, which is nice. If you don't, this gets banished out of the game. So let's talk about closing locations, and that's really what you're trying to do. Now you can close a location in a couple of different ways. If you run through the entire deck of cards here, and there's no cards left at this location, then you can attempt to close. So let's see, let's take a look at this here. So these locations here have all different kinds of effects based on the type of location it is. So here's the farmhouse here. So when closing this location, summon and defeat a random monster. So that's what has to happen. To close this location, you've got to summon a random monster from the box. You're going to go here, dig through that deck of cards, and then let's see what we got here. Okay, we got a skeleton. So you have to defeat him, and then now you can close the location here. Now the other way you can close the location is to defeat one of these henchmen here. So here's a henchman. So if you reveal this, you're going to have an encounter here. So you're going to defeat it with 8. And then this guy has some other effects, but if defeated, you may immediately attempt to close the location. So once you defeat this, you can do whatever the location says to defeat it. So what's this one say here? So when closing, summon and defeat another bandit. Okay, so basically you defeat that, and then you can immediately try to close it, even if there are still cards left. So you attempt to close it early. Well, why are you trying to close these locations? Well, I happen to know that the villain is in here. And so when you encounter the villain, then you're going to defeat it. But if there's an open location for the villain to escape to, so even when you defeat it, he's going to go to an open location. So let's say we had closed this one and this one, and we hadn't yet closed these two. If I defeat it, he's going to escape there, and then you're going to have to defeat it again. So the interesting thing is if you defeat the villain, he is going to escape to one of these two remaining spots, and then you're going to automatically close the location. You don't have to do the special closing location effect there. Now, when the villain escapes, depending on one of two things, if you defeat him and he escapes, you're basically going to pull a blessing from the box, shuffle it up with the villain, and then put both of them in either the open locations that are left, and then reshuffle those locations. So you know he's in one of these two spots, you're just not sure. He ran away, he got away, you got to find him again. Now, when you attempt to defeat the villain, there's one thing you can do prior to the encounter, and that is to temporarily close the location. So let's, for all intents and purposes, these two are closed, let's say, and then we have these two open here. So let's say she was here and she was going to fight the villain. These are already closed, we don't have to worry about these. These two are still open, so even if we defeat him, he's going to escape. Now, if you encounter him and don't defeat him, he's actually going to escape still, but instead of pulling blessings from the box, you're going to pull them from this deck, so it's going to reduce your timer. You don't want that to happen. So prior to having the encounter, though, each of these players, if they're at the location, they can try to temporarily close the location. So when closing, this guy will need to do a wisdom or survival check, and then she can try her thing. So if these are temporarily closed and you defeat him, then you're going to win. But let's say he succeeded and she failed, then you defeat him, and then he's going to escape over here. Now we know he's there. So he's escaped here. This is closed, this is closed, this is closed. This one's still open because it was only temporarily closed. And then we've kind of narrowed it down. So you basically narrow it down, try to close everything, and defeat the villain before you run through your 30 cards, or before any or all of your guys die. You can keep playing after one guy dies, but if you're playing a campaign, I don't see a reason why you would. You just, restart and try not to get anybody killed. Okay, hope you enjoyed the overview. First of all, this is probably one of the most innovative games of the last, I don't know, however many years. It fully feels like an RPG, and role-playing is not something I've really done that much of. I did it for like a year in college. But this definitely is very evocative of that experience, and that really is what this game is. It is a role-playing game. It's just a new way of doing it, and that's all it is. So if you're going into this thinking you're going to get a card game, then that's not what you're going to get. Now, that being said, the card mechanics work excellent. It's very, very straightforward. You move around, you flip a card, and you encounter it. But how you sort of manage the cards that you have in your hand, and how quickly you try to sort of burn through the different cards in your deck are going to be very important. Now, I know as I'm talking here, I've left a couple of minor details with the rules as far as like starting equipment and probably a couple of things, but the rules are not too heavy-handed, but they are, relatively detailed and they're well written. So definitely play a scenario or two to sort of get your feet wet before you jump into the full campaign, and then find out, you're in 3 adventures in or 3 scenarios in and you're playing something wrong. Definitely. But I really, really have liked this game. And so I'm excited to get my group who's also excited about, doing a campaign over basically the next year. I believe they're going to have adventure packs coming out like every 2 months or something. and a very reasonable price point. I think around $15 or so for it's a small deck of cards, but there's a lot of cool stuff that's built into those cards. But yeah, the hand management of the game is actually very interesting. It feels very integrated into that role-playing experience, and it's just neat. I mean, you're going to have different sort of minor encounters at the different locations each time you do it. I mean, you could play that introductory scenario a few times and still have relatively different experiences. You don't really necessarily have to feel like once you've done a scenario or an adventure that you can't go and do it again, because maybe it's something that you enjoy that specific encounters, but it's going to throw enough of variety at you as far as the rewards that you may find, some of the different monsters that might be happening. So that's going to add to the sort of variety of the story that happens, and it's very much a story-driven experience here, and it's, to me, astonishing how well that comes across here. The games that I've played at this has actually all come down to the wire, whether we won or lost. So it is very intense as the game sort of evolves. And again, back to the variability is, where those henchmen and the villains are in that deck can lead to a lot of, different sort of pacings that are going to happen. If you flip a henchman right away, and boy, you can just close that, that location off quickly. And so that makes things a little bit easier. But as you start to kind of burn through that timer deck of those blessings, and you still have a lot of locations open, then you start to worry, and you can kind of feel that end of the line approaching, and it gets kind of intense and dramatic at the end. So I like that. It's very much a co-op in that way. You've got to be at locations helping each other out. You're not just always going to want to spread out, but you kind of want to spread out a little bit to scout the area. And then as some of the cards maybe will get shuffled back into some of those location decks, reminds me of Robinson Crusoe, which I just also recently played. But what's going to happen. It's not just flip an event and something bad happens and you deal with it. Some of those events and people and villains and things are going to go back in the deck, so there's a little bit of anticipation that's going to happen, which is really, really cool. So anyway, yeah, definitely not a traditional card game. So like most board gamers, card gamers may not like this, but if you really want that kind of role-playing experience, be able to do a campaign, it really works. It doesn't take long to play a single scenario or session, maybe about an hour, give or take, because it plays very quickly and smoothly, and once you kind of get the rhythm of it down, you can definitely knock out a scenario in an hour. So if you play just like one scenario a week, for however many weeks, you're going to have several, experiences that you're going to be able to have, and you can play it around other games at game night. So if you play, have a type of game night where you can play a couple of games at night, you can open up with a scenario of this. My suspicion is that you want to play the next scenario, but you can integrate this into your normal board game night. So I think if you're a board gamer, kind of wanting that RPG experience that games like Ravenloft and stuff like that don't really give you, that full tactile RPG, stat driven, kind of your character that you carry through week to week. You don't really get that with any of these other board games. But this one definitely has it. So anyway, definitely take a look at it if it's interesting. Thanks.